Okay, so I couldn't help but overhear that Sony is going to shut down the PlayStation Network store for the PlayStation 3, PSP, and PS Vita. This basically means that come July and August, people won't be able to buy anything from those stores anymore. And also, if I'm not mistaken, this also means that any kind of online interaction with other players won't work anymore either. But before I tell you what I think about that, I would like to, first and foremost, talk about my personal history with the PlayStation 3. But if you're not interested, then there will be a timestamp on screen and in the description box below. It's okay. I remember in either December 2010 or January 2011 when my mom came back home from work and she said to me, "Oh, and also, I forgot one of my shopping bags by the door. Could you please go and get it for me?" She said something like that. I went over to the door to get that mystery bag for her, and I couldn't help but notice the GameStop logo on it. While I was bringing over that bag, I kept staring at it, wide-eyed. When she finally took out its contents, I was surprised to find out that it was a PlayStation 3. I also noticed that she bought the slim model. I was super happy. By the way, about my reaction. Even though I wasn't trying to be funny, I think my mom liked the way that I reacted. I mean, I'm happy that I made her laugh, but you know. When mom was at GameStop, the guy or girl behind the counter asked her to pick some games for it. And sadly, since mom doesn't know what I like to play, she had to pick something. And so, the day one games that I got for that PS3 was God of War 3, Far Cry 2, and Battlefield Bad Company 2. And sadly, out of those 3 games, the only game that I played from start to finish, and more than once, was God of War 3. As for the other 2 aforementioned games, I played them just a little bit, but I myself am not a fan of shooters, except for Metal Gear Solid. Of course, I couldn't just say that to her. It wouldn't have been very nice. I didn't want to act all pissy and stampy and be all like, no, that's not what I like, that's not what I like. No. When she gave me that PlayStation 3 and those games, I was super happy and said, "Thank you so much, this is so wonderful." Back then when I got my PlayStation 3, I was a tail-end teenager, still attending school. I remember, I played my PlayStation 3 from the early to late 2010s. The games that I played on it was Final Fantasy 13, Metal Gear Solid 4, Sonic Unleashed, Nier, God of War 3, God of War HD Collection, God of War HD Collection Volume 2, Bayonetta, Devil May Cry 4, Dante's Inferno, Vanquish, Resident Evil 5, Knight's Contract, Darksiders, Dragon Ball Z Raging Blast 2, and Budokai HD Collection, Dark Souls, Demon Souls, Persona 5, and there might be another game in there or two that I can't remember right now, but anyways, moving on. The timing of when I received my PlayStation 3 Slim could not have been even better, because that was a time when things were really looking good for it. I remember how some people here in Sweden celebrated the release of the PlayStation 2 in the early 2000s, and how crazy popular it was. Even if some people weren't even gamers, a lot of households from back then had a PlayStation 2. And why is that? Because it was also a DVD player. The PlayStation 2 sold like crazy all over the world, and even here in Sweden. It was super popular, I remember. However, tisk. The same cannot be said about the PlayStation 3, sadly. I remember the PlayStation 3's shallow launch. Back then, when I was an early teen, I never once bumped into anybody who cared so much about the PS3. No, back then, it was the Xbox 360 and the Nintendo DS that was the talk of the town. And so, a lot of people were not in a celebratory mood for the PS3. No, most people were not even interested. It took Sony all the way to either 2009 or 2011 for their console in question to finally become popular and profitable. Now, I don't know if other people feel what I feel, but I am somebody that used to be a huge fan of the PlayStation brand since the PlayStation 1 days, and when I heard from different sources that in the early 2010s the PS3 was finally catching up to the Xbox 360, I was super happy. And so, my hope for the PlayStation brand had been restored. I no longer wanted a Nintendo Wii or a Nintendo DS or an Xbox 360. No, I wanted a PlayStation 3. By the way, about that, the console wars, if I remembered it correctly, from the mid to late 2000s, the Xbox 360 was the leading console at the time, not the PlayStation 3, sadly. If I remembered it correctly. At the tail end of the 7th generation of consoles, in 2011, The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim finally released, and I bought Skyrim for my PC. My older brother asked me why I didn't buy it on my PlayStation 3, and I said to him something to the effect of, I don't like to play first-person type games with a controller. I would like to play them on PC with a mouse and keyboard. I said to him something like that. I don't know about you guys, but I made an excellent choice when I bought Skyrim for my PC, because Skyrim on the PS3 is considered as one of the worst ports ever. So I consider myself very lucky that I bought it for my PC instead. By the way, when I put the Skyrim disc in my PC, I was surprised to find out that I had to have a Steam account in order to play it. And so, I reluctantly created my Steam account in frustration. At first, I was very angry that I had to have a Steam account in order to play it. But I'm not angry anymore. I'm okay now. I am now very happy that I did create my Steam account after all, because if it wasn't for that, then I never would have gotten into PC gaming. Since then, 2011, I slowly started to convert over to PC. And then I think 2014 or 15, I then became a full-time PC gamer. However, there was one game or franchise I did not want to pass up on my PS3. Demon's Souls and Dark Souls. Not only did Skyrim release in 2011, but so did Dark Souls. I remember when I was watching that episode of RB and the Chief, God's Work, when I was a teenager. Arbiter played Demon's Souls, and I was curious about it. I remember thinking to myself, what? What is he playing? Why haven't I heard of that game before? After I was done watching that episode, I just moved on with my life. I didn't think much of that mystery game later on. But then, around the time when From Software just announced that they were developing a spiritual successor to Demon's Souls, I remembered it. I remembered that episode of RB and the Chief. Dark Souls' slogan or catchphrase was preparetodie.com. and I wanted to know what that was all about. And so I bought a physical copy of Demon's Souls. And when I played Demon's Souls, I became a fan of that. And so I became even more hyped for Dark Souls when the release date was closing in. I even pre-ordered it and got Dark Souls Limited Edition. And believe it or not, both Skyrim and Dark Souls managed to slightly take away the spotlight away from the then very popular first-person shooter genre at the time, namely Call of Duty. And slowly over time, a good amount of developers wanted to develop games like Dark Souls. Yes, Skyrim may have been the most talked about and the fastest best-selling game at the time. But it was Dark Souls that, at long last, broke the cycle. The cycle of easily accessible games that even your grandma can play, no problem. And so, the term Souls-like was born. Dark Souls was that influential, even though both games competed. Now, people may block me or unsubscribe to me when I say this, but for me, in my subjective opinion, my #1 game of 2011 is Dark Souls. And that goes for the entirety of the 2010s. For me, in my subjective opinion, my #1 game of the 2010s as a whole is Dark Souls, hands down. Oh, and by the way, sometime later, Dark Souls did eventually come to PC. And it's considered as one of the worst PC ports ever. However, From Software, years later, rectified this with Dark Souls Remastered. Speaking of a Japanese company such as From Software, they are not the only Japanese developers that all of a sudden started to port their games over to PC. Throughout the years, I've noticed how more and more of my favorite Japanese developers start to port their games over to PC, which I find to be a bit odd actually, because I have always been under the impression that Japan just doesn't seem to care much about PC gaming. To my knowledge, home computers in Japan isn't much of a thing there. As far as I know, Japan's gaming culture is not the same as it is in North America or Europe. Last time I checked, Japan seems to be more into mobile gaming than PC. As far as I know with PC gaming in Japan, it's something most do in cyber cafes and not at home. And so, when I see my favorite Japanese developers make PC ports for both old and new games, it just blows my mind. I'm taken back by that. I am taken back that they would port over their games that doesn't seem so popular domestically. I mean, look, I'm happy about the ports and all, but I don't really understand. Do those Japanese developers even earn back any money for porting those games over to a market that isn't so popular over there as it is in here in Europe or over there in North America? I mean, I am not a businessman or a developer myself, so I really don't know. But anyways, let us move on to my other topic, okay? I had a pretty good time with my PS3, though I must admit, I couldn't help but feel frustrated when more and more of my favorite Japanese developers slowly moved away from the PlayStation brand and released their games as sequels on other platforms. And I am not talking about multiplats. No, I don't mind when a game is released on multiple platforms. It's okay, in my opinion, it's okay. It's just that what I'm trying to say is, I feel frustrated when a sequel or a new game of one of my favorite Japanese developers that used to develop games on the PlayStation or PlayStation 2 all of a sudden jumped ship to another console, and their new game or sequel would never see the light of day on the PS3. That's what frustrated me. Valkyrie Profile Covenant of the Plum and Kingdom Hearts 358 Days Over 2. In the end, because of the fact that more and more Japanese developers jumped ship to another console, a good amount of popular games on the PS3 came from the West. Now, I do realize that a little here and there would be a good selling franchise from Japan, like Metal Gear Solid, Sonic, Resident Evil, Zone of Enders, Silent Hill and what have you. But they were not the main focus of the 7th generation of consoles. No, the main focus at the time, before 2011, were shooters like Call of Duty and Gears of War. Now, I got nothing against Western developers and games. No, it's just that ever since the PlayStation 3 released, and when I got one myself, I waited and waited and waited for a new Unimucha, a new Kingdom Hearts, a new Zone of Enders, a new Dragon Ball Z Budokai, a new Drakengard, a new Valkyrie Profile, a new Breath of Fire, but nothing. That was the part that frustrated me. I thought for sure that most of my favorite Japanese games would come to the PS3 eventually. They didn't. Or sometimes, like I said, they jumped ship to another platform. And so, in my personal opinion, the PlayStation 3 was a pretty good console, but not as glorious as the PS2, in my opinion. In the here and now, 2021, I don't have my PS3 anymore. Around, I think, November 2020, I gave it and the games away to my older brother and his 2 sons. And naturally, since my nephews are too young to play most of my games, my brother and his wife have hidden my games away from them. Except for one. Sonic Unleashed. Now, according to what my mom said, when my big brother gave Sonic Unleashed to his oldest son, he went nuts over it. He was super happy. My oldest nephew is a fan of Sonic the Hedgehog, it seems. I wish I could have seen the way my nephew reacted, instead of just hearing about it. I mean, I'm so glad to hear that my PlayStation 3 Slim and Sonic Unleashed finally came to good use. I'm so happy about that. By the way, in either early or mid 2010s, before my nephews were even born, I played Sonic Unleashed a lot, but that was a long time ago. And I never finished it, unfortunately for me, because, oh my god, the Werehog stages, they eventually wore me out. And so, I stopped playing. I just couldn't take it anymore. And the controls for the Werehog, they're not that good. Not as good as Devil May Cry 4 or God of War. And so I stopped playing Sonic Unleashed. I was like, I think, 90%. I think I was at that temple boss, or something like that. By the way, about my big brother's 2 sons. My nephews. Even though they keep running up and down in my apartment. Even though they may be 2 very loud, tiny monsters. I love them. I love my nephews. They're wonderful. I hope everything goes well for them with my PlayStation 3. I wish them good gaming and all the power to them, and I hope they succeed where I failed with Sonic Unleashed. And now, I'm done talking about my history with the PlayStation 3 and about my nephews. Now I'm going to talk about the closure of the PSN stores in question. Now, when it comes to what I feel about their closure, I feel conflicted. I feel conflicted because it is such a shame that PS3 and indie games are going to vanish into thin air forever. Not just that, exclusive games are going to vanish too. Exclusive games that never saw the light of day on other platforms will be gone. As for the other side of my confliction, the closure of those stores doesn't affect me. It's not a big deal for me actually, because, like I said, I don't have my PS3 anymore. I've long since moved on to PC gaming. I used to be a console gamer as a teen, but not anymore. By the way, I think this is another reason to why Sony is going to close them down. Players are, or have long since, jumped ship to other platforms. Not that I am speaking on everyone else's behalf, but that's just the way I see it. I mean, I can imagine that a lot of players have already moved on to other platforms. Those 3 PlayStation Network stores in question are probably, at this point in their life cycles, ghost towns by now. I think I understand why Sony doesn't want to spend time and money on maintaining a server that not that many people care about anymore. I think I understand. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, renting and maintaining a network or a server costs money, and especially if it is maintained for a long time, right? And those 3 stores in question started way back in, I think, from the mid to late 2000s or so. So, yeah. Now, on the other hand, what some people may have been saying, something to the effect of Sony isn't going to add some sort of backwards compatibility to those older games. Yeah, I know. I'm upset about that too. Now, I do not know anything about programming or have online stores work, but why can't Sony just take those 3 stores in question and merge them with the PS5 store? Oh, you know, so they can become one big happy store or what have you. I mean, wouldn't that be more efficient? Think about it, just one big collective PlayStation Network store on all platforms, and that's it. But all of that aside, I'm speculating that Sony may be thinking of making HD remasters. I'm guessing that this could be the case because this is what happened with the PlayStation 3. Way back, Sony removed the PlayStation 3's backwards compatibility to play PS2 games, and so, in order to compensate for this, developers created HD remasters. I don't think Sony is intentionally killing off their 3 PlayStation Network stores in question without a good reason. But, you know what? These bad news aside, the good news is, allegedly, based on what I heard from other people, players will still be able to re-download their already purchased games even after the stores are closed. Well, I would hope so actually. If this is true, then this is an improvement over how digital services used to do it in the past. As in, now that our online store is shutting down for good, you better not delete any of your games now, okay? Because if you do, then you will lose them forever. Sadly for you. And don't expect any customer support help from any of our former staff members. They have no obligation to help you. Sorry. That's how it used to be in the past. But if it is true that Sony will allow players to re-download their already purchased games, then good on Sony, good on them for improving upon the digital formula at last. Now, before I cap off this PodVid, I have one last thing to say. There was one PlayStation 3 game that I always wanted to play, but never got the chance to. I played the demo, but not the full game, because the full game has never been available on the PS3's PSN store, sadly. It was available once physically at one point, but never digitally. The game's DLCs and demo has always been available digitally on the store, or rather, not anymore, they won't, not anymore. The game was a JRPG that looked like a mix between Pokemon, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure and Persona. Folklore. The game is called Folklore. Ever since I played the demo Folklore in the early 2010s, I always wanted to play the full game. I've been wishing and hoping that Sony will one day put Folklore on either their PS4 or PS5 store, or heck, why not on PS Now? But no, that's not happening. Besides, the main developers behind that game have long since gone out of business, so those developers are not going to contact Sony anytime soon or anything. No, that's not happening. I know Sony's not going to put Folklore up on their online stores. It's just wishful thinking. Would be cool though. Would be cool though. And so, if I am not mistaken, at this point, the only way to play Folklore is to play it through a PlayStation 3 emulator. Shh. And that PS3 emulator that I'm thinking of, as far as I know, is going to need a beast CPU if I want that emulator to run very well, which I myself don't have right now, sadly for me. So maybe I'll try that PS3 emulator maybe next year, maybe. But the topic of Folklore aside, my last game that I bought and played for the PS3 was Persona 5 in 2019. Or maybe 2020, or I don't know. Which I'm hoping that my older brother has not deleted. Because if he does, then, oh, you know, no more Persona 5. Forever. But yeah, this is all that I wanted to say about the closure of those PS3 stores. Take care, everybody. You as well, dear nephews. You'll hear from me again. Bye bye for now.